The first pulses of the distress signal echoed through the void long before anyone understood what triggered them, and by the time the fragmented warnings reached the outer councils, entire star systems had already shifted into high alert. Every translation carried the same desperate thread: unidentified vessels moving with unnatural coordination, ignoring all hails, cutting across restricted corridors as if the boundaries of the galaxy meant nothing to them. The Concord thought they were dealing with a new machine uprising, some rogue AI collective expanding into sentient space, and the urgency multiplied when early sensor captures showed the objects accelerating through radiation storms no organic crew should survive. Committees scrambled for answers, but the data formed a picture that defied every established category of known travel. More messages poured in. Patrol fleets reported that the intruders changed formation patterns faster than any predictive algorithm could track. Their propulsion signatures didn't match any of the cataloged propulsion families. Even the archives of extinct civilizations had no equivalent. Analysts assumed they were autonomous platforms, too precise, too reckless, too willing to push through zones that normal species treated like death traps. By the time a dozen border worlds forwarded the same message for military aid, the Concord summoned every representative for an emergency council, hoping to define the threat before panic surpassed containment. Inside the chamber, fear dictated discussion. Advisors projected scenarios in which the objects multiplied, converged, or cut deep into core territories. Several factions argued for direct interdiction, convinced that a swarm of self-correcting drones had been deployed by an unknown empire. Their assumption intensified when they reviewed footage of the intruders diving through plasma fissures that routinely shredded advanced shielding. The gathered species reached a consensus that no living crew could endure such conditions, reinforcing the belief that these vessels were machines built for confrontation. Then the data changed everything. A long-range biosignature sweep isolated faint human life signs buried beneath heavy radiation dampeners. At first the Council dismissed it as sensor interference, but multiple independent systems returned the same readings. The intruders weren't autonomous constructs, they were crude. Biologicals had willingly taken those routes, treated impossible hazards as minor inconveniences, and reached the sector with no external support. Disbelief drowned the chamber. Every species present had evolved under careful environmental thresholds. To them, the behaviors captured by surveillance looked suicidal. The idea that humans had not only survived but thrived under conditions that should kill most life instantly triggered deeper alarm. Reports from border diplomats painted humanity as an unpredictable force from a remote spiral arm, a species unbound by the limitations the rest of the galaxy accepted. Their exploratory patterns showed no predictable logic. They ignored the safe lanes entirely. They crossed lethal zones as if they were casual shortcuts. And every vessel displayed layers of reinforcement that made no sense for standard survey missions. What one species considered overkill, humanity apparently treated as baseline. The Concord concluded they weren't facing invaders, yet the panic remained. A species willing to endure annihilation-level hazards just to explore was a species no one knew how to handle. Their tolerance for danger broke every diplomatic expectation. Their designs violated every known engineering philosophy. And if these were merely their explorers, then no one wanted to imagine the scale of their military forces. The Council issued a sector-wide call for reinforcements before humanity misinterpreted any defensive action as hostility. However, their fear metastasized into certainty when a nervous border captain fired a warning blast at one of the approaching objects. The blast registered, flared across a hull, and dissipated without causing meaningful damage. The shock wave didn't slow the intruder. It merely adjusted course slightly, continuing forward with the same deliberate rhythm. To the aliens, this confirmed every nightmare the Council had sketched in theory. Whatever this species was, their vessels absorbed strikes that should have carved open heavy cruisers. The Concord now faced a truth they weren't prepared for. They had provoked an unknown civilization that consistently demonstrated survivability far beyond anything in documented space. Their misinterpretation stacked into a single conclusion that spread across neighboring nations like wildfire. They believed they had accidentally antagonized a species capable of crossing the void with disregard for the galaxy's natural barriers. The chamber fell into tense silence as the final transmission came through, an energy surge rippling from distant space. It wasn't a weapon. It was a fleet signature. Humanity had detected the defensive mobilization and responded instantly. Not with ambassadors. Not with negotiators. With something far larger. The human fleet was arriving. The moment the first gravitational distortions rippled through the sector, every alien fleet braced for what they assumed would be a handful of reconnaissance vessels. Their projections expected small units, lightly armed, meant to retrieve the explorers that had triggered the original panic. Instead, the void folded open as if torn by an invisible blade, and a formation of human warships emerged in disciplined waves. What appeared first were the mid-range cruisers, angular, armored, radiating thermal signatures that dwarfed anything the assembled coalitions had ever recorded. Then came the carriers, their hulls layered with shielding that looked geological rather than manufactured. Finally, the battleships arrived, each one marked by reinforced plating heavy enough to classify as mobile fortresses. Silence spread across the alien channels. Their sensors struggled to process what they were seeing. Humanity had not sent a search team. They had unleashed an entire defensive armada large enough to counter a regional war. And the most startling part was not the number of ships, but the intent carved into their formation. Every warship moved with flawless synchronization, positioning themselves between the stranded explorers and the surrounding alien fleets, forming a barrier that communicated absolute purpose. Not aggression. Not conquest. Protection. Analysts scrambled to interpret the engineering philosophy behind the vessels. They found designs that defied the efficiency standards of interstellar engineering. Instead of balancing strength with weight, humans built as if material limits were irrelevant. Hulls displayed redundancy loops so dense that even catastrophic breaches would only compromise isolated compartments. Power cores had secondary and tertiary containment fields, something the galaxy considered outdated due to cost and weight. Yet here they were, powering ships larger and more durable than anything in the sector. Attempts at communication fluttered through the comms. The human flagship transmitted a short signal, a steady, calm request for identification. The phrasing carried no hostility, but the aliens misread the restraint as a veiled ultimatum. Representatives argued internally on how to respond, their fear magnified by the sheer discipline radiating from the human fleet's silent posture. The incoming signals carried languages not yet parsed by alien translators, and the tonal sharpness of human communication patterns was mistaken for military coldness. The tension snapped when an automated defense system on an alien destroyer misinterpreted a human power calibration as a threat charge. The destroyer released a single plasma bolt. It struck the nearest human frigate head-on. The blast should have pierced through shields and burrowed into the core. Instead, it splashed against the layered plating, scattering into harmless light across the armor. The frigate adjusted its position by a fractional vector, not even acknowledging the strike. The alien fleet froze. Every species watching confronted the same realization: their weapons, designed to deter major threats, barely registered on human vessels. Determination settled across the human formation. Their ships shifted subtly, maintaining the protective barrier but adopting a configuration optimized for suppressive response if needed. Nothing aggressive. Nothing escalatory. Just an unmistakable statement that they would tolerate no further interference. Alien commanders attempted to reassure each other, but no explanation soothed the rising dread. If these were humanity's mid-tier ships, the true warships must be beyond nightmare. If this was their defensive posture, then their offensive doctrine was unimaginable. The oldest strategists whispered that no biological species should have the will, or the need, to construct fleets of this scale. Yet humanity had done so without any galactic support, evolution, or shared technological lineage. Every fleet in the region realized they were outmatched. Strength, discipline, and purpose emanated from every human vessel. The explorers at the center of the formation transmitted a brief confirmation signal to their arriving fleet, and the response was immediate, a tightening of ranks, protective and absolute. The galaxy's great powers had prepared for a threat. What they confronted instead was a species that treated danger as routine, resilience as instinct, and unity as unbreakable. The signal had been sent for reinforcements, but no one expected the answer to reshape the balance of power in a single arrival. The human fleet had come to stand its ground. The first wave of distortion rippled across the sector like a silent quake, bending starlight before any ship appeared. Alien captains braced for a small retrieval team, expecting perhaps a handful of human vessels dispatched to escort their lost explorers. Instead, the void opened into a cascading surge of gravitational wakes, each one announcing the arrival of something far beyond the predictions of every military model. One after another, massive silhouettes cut through the fractured space, their hulls framed by shockwaves that rolled across sensor arrays. The human fleet had not come lightly. They had arrived in full force, with a formation so vast that even veteran commanders struggled to believe their readings. The lead ships formed a protective arc within seconds, an intricate defensive shell surrounding the isolated human explorers. The precision of their positioning unsettled the alien observers more than their size. Every vessel locked into place with mechanical certainty, as though each movement had been rehearsed countless times. Their armor plating reflected faint traces of radiation burns, atmospheric scarring, and microfracture repairs that hinted at journeys through conditions no sane navigator would choose willingly. These weren't ceremonial ships. They were built to survive environments that the galaxy treated as natural boundaries. As more vessels emerged, analysts attempted to classify them, but nothing matched internal databases. Human cruisers carried structural reinforcement levels comparable to alien dreadnoughts. Frigates displayed heat sinks proportionally larger than some destroyer engines. Their carriers operated with energy output that suggested internal reactors built at scales that violated sensible engineering. Instead of balancing weight, efficiency, and output, humanity had designed every ship as if destruction wasn't a possibility but an expectation they planned to endure. The fleet's philosophy was unmistakable: survive everything first, fight second if necessary. Across the alien networks, debate erupted. Some argued that humanity had misread the distress signals as calls for help, not fear. Others insisted this deployment was an intimidation tactic, a show of strength meant to secure dominance before official negotiations. But in the center of the strategic confusion, one truth drowned out every theory: the human fleet was not aligning for attack. They were forming a barrier, a vast wall against anyone attempting to approach their stranded vessels. It was not conquest. It was protection executed with the seriousness of wartime protocol. Attempts at communication resumed. Human channels transmitted short, precise signals requesting identification and intentions. Their tone, clipped and efficient, triggered further misunderstanding. Many species relied on melodic cadence or layered politeness rituals, and the human directness read as cold and confrontational. Several diplomats warned against responding too casually, convinced that a single misinterpreted phrase could escalate the situation further. Then came the moment that tightened every throat in command rooms across the sector. A sensor calibration aboard an alien corvette misread the shifting electromagnetic field around the human formation as hostile targeting. Automatic defense algorithms activated without the crew's consent, releasing a pulse of condensed energy. The bolt streaked through the void and struck the nearest human vessel squarely. Instead of detonating, the impact burst into scattered sparks across layered armor panels. The human ship adjusted trajectory slightly to compensate for the minor shove. No alarms blared. No counterfire launched. To the galaxy, that restraint was more terrifying than retaliation. Alien admirals froze, expecting vengeance. None came. The humans simply repositioned, reinforcing their defensive arc, careful and silent. That measured response unraveled the last threads of alien confidence. If humanity possessed firepower to erase fleets yet refused to use it casually, then their discipline was as formidable as their engineering. Fear transformed into awe. Observers realized that the ships emerging from hyperspace weren't flaunting power, they were fulfilling responsibility. The explorers behind them mattered enough to mobilize an armada the size of a small empire. Humanity had crossed inhospitable space, fought against physics itself, and arrived not with demands but with unwavering purpose. The galaxy had braced for invaders. Instead, they had met a civilization that answered danger with unity, protected its own with absolute resolve, and moved with a certainty that made even ancient powers reconsider their place in the cosmos. The human fleet was not here to threaten. It was here to stand. The messages began spreading across the sector before anyone could control them, each one carrying a different interpretation of humanity's sudden arrival. Some broadcasts claimed the fleet was preparing a preemptive strike. Others argued the humans were demanding surrender. None of it was true, but fear moved faster than correction, and every species receiving the reports added its own assumptions, reshaping the story until it felt inevitable. Fleets that had been on standby now accelerated toward the contested system, convinced they were answering the opening move of a galactic conflict. No one bothered to verify the truth. The scale of the human deployment was enough to override logic. Human commanders continued sending calm, structured communication bursts, simple requests for identification and intentions. But alien linguistic systems, unprepared for the sharp cadence of human speech patterns, filtered the messages through automated tone analyzers calibrated for completely different emotional structures. The translations emerged sounding harsher, colder, and more authoritative than intended. To the alien coalitions listening, the humans didn't sound confused or diplomatic. They sounded like a power issuing warnings with absolute confidence. Misinterpretations compounded quickly. Human survey drones began sweeping the area, mapping gravity distortions to identify safe routes of retreat. Alien reconnaissance ships intercepted the data streams and assumed they were targeting algorithms marking strategic positions for attack. A human science vessel deployed medical drones to the damaged alien destroyer as an act of goodwill, hoping to stabilize casualties from the accidental shot. The drone's unfamiliar signatures triggered biohazard alarms, and the destroyer panicked, broadcasting claims of a biological assault. That transmission spread like wildfire, igniting further mistrust. Every attempt at clarity fractured into new layers of misunderstanding. Human engineers rerouted power through their outer defensive grid to compensate for the load of maintaining so many ships in tight formation. Alien observers interpreted the energy spike as weapons priming. A human support ship extended a sensor mast to improve translation accuracy. An alien fleet mistook it for a targeting array. Each innocent action appeared sinister through the lens of anxiety. Meanwhile, distant nations prepared fleets of their own. Some believed a catastrophic war was unfolding and felt obligated to intervene. Others hoped to seize advantage in the chaos. A paranoid empire broadcast the most destabilizing proclamation yet: if humanity mobilized such a fleet simply to protect explorers, then their true military strength must be immeasurable. That idea spread uncontested, reshaping diplomatic discussions across dozens of systems. Human command debated whether to withdraw entirely, but leaving their explorers unprotected was unacceptable. Staying signaled commitment, leaving signaled weakness. Either decision risked escalation. The fleet remained in formation, shields active but weapons cold, doing everything possible to show restraint while maintaining defense. Yet to alien sensors, the unwavering discipline looked like the posture of an unstoppable force waiting for provocation. The tipping point came when a jittery captain in a distant coalition misinterpreted a human maneuver and broadcast a panicked alert claiming the humans were about to fire. Though false, the message bounced through networks faster than any clarification. Fleets still en route accelerated. Some initiated preemptive targeting sequences. Diplomats lost control of their channels, drowned out by military chatter. The situation spiraled past anything intention could correct. Human analysts watched the influx of signatures with mounting concern. The number of vessels converging was no longer defensive, it was the mass mobilization of the galaxy. And every ship arriving carried the same misconception, that humanity was preparing to strike first. Human commanders issued louder, clearer signals, but mistranslations stripped nuance and reinforced alien conviction that the humans were asserting dominance. Even silence became dangerous. When human ships paused transmissions to avoid further miscommunication, aliens interpreted the sudden quiet as confirmation of imminent action. Without firing a single shot, humanity had found itself surrounded by fleets larger than anything recorded in known history, all galvanized by misplaced fear. The galaxy wasn't reacting to aggression. It was reacting to the terrifying unknown, a species strong enough to endure impossible journeys, disciplined enough to remain still under threat, and confident enough not to flinch. By the time the next coalition fleet exited FTL, the misunderstanding had grown into something uncontainable. One misstep, one spark, and the largest accidental war in the galaxy's history would ignite, despite humanity doing everything possible to avoid it. You said? The arrival of the coalition's heavy fleet shattered what little balance remained. Their ships tore out of FTL in tight phalanxes, weapons already charged, guided by outdated intelligence claiming humanity had initiated hostilities. The commanders hadn't reviewed the news sensor data or diplomatic corrections. They acted on fear hardened into certainty. Before any channel could open, they executed a synchronized barrage meant to overwhelm shields and force a retreat. Thousands of energy lances burned across the void, converging on the human line in a single blinding wave. The impacts shook the sector. Shields flared, strained, and buckled against the onslaught. Several human vessels dipped from the sheer pressure, armor plates glowing white from the absorbed heat. Internal systems rerouted power in microsecond adjustments, stabilizing compartments that would have collapsed under lesser engineering. Alarms echoed across human decks, but none of the ships fell. What stunned the galaxy wasn't the endurance, it was the lack of retaliation. Against an attack large enough to cripple most civilizations, humanity responded with unwavering discipline. Human command activated bulwark protocols, a defensive doctrine designed to neutralize large forces without inflicting catastrophic loss of life. The fleet shifted into a layered formation, distributing shield stress across multiple vessels. Targeting systems recalibrated to disable, not destroy. Their counter-strike unfolded with surgical precision. Pulses of electromagnetic disruption streaked outward, striking alien ships at exact structural nodes. Engines powered down instantly, weapons flickered out, and targeting locks dissolved. Alien hulls drifted, intact but helpless, their crews stunned to find themselves alive despite initiating the assault. The coalition expected retaliation measured in obliteration. Instead, humanity offered restraint sharper than any blade. Observers realized the humans were hitting only non-lethal subsystems, sparing every life support module. Even damaged vessels were caught in controlled tractor fields, preventing collisions. It wasn't mercy rooted in weakness. It was a demonstration of intentional control, the kind only a civilization accustomed to surviving chaos could maintain under fire. Yet not everyone accepted the lesson. A rogue faction hidden within the coalition fleet, intent on forcing humanity to reveal its maximum capability, launched a forbidden weapon without authorization, a stellar core missile designed to destabilize planetary crusts. It streaked across the void toward the system's inner world, leaving a trail of fusion particles bright enough to register across multiple sectors. Every species watching braced for the impossible decision humanity would face: intercept it and risk mutual annihilation, or let it hit and reshape the system forever. Human interceptors reacted instantly. Dozens of drones fired from 3 different vessels, weaving into a formation that intersected the missile's trajectory. Their coordinated blast met the warhead head-on. The detonation expanded like a miniature sun, scattering debris across the void. The shockwave hammered nearby alien ships, sending them tumbling as they scrambled to stabilize their vectors. Human vessels absorbed the secondary energy surge, shielding weaker fleets with their reinforced hulls. For the first time, the galaxy saw humans not as intruders or threats but as pillars standing between catastrophe and survival. No civilization had ever neutralized such a weapon so cleanly, let alone protected their attackers in the process. The coalition's morale shattered. Their tactical arrogance evaporated. What they had unleashed could have wiped out thousands, and humanity had responded by preventing devastation for both sides. Then the light dimmed, and a new signature emerged from deep space. A singular, immense gravity well pressed against sensors, its arrival bending the battlefield into silence. The sovereign apex translated into real space, dwarfing even the largest human battleships. Its presence alone halted every remaining escalation. Alien fleets fell quiet as its shadow stretched across the stars, radiating an authority that could not be challenged. To the galaxy, the earlier human ships had been terrifying. This new arrival made them seem ordinary. The coalition that had fired first now understood the truth. Humanity had shown only the smallest fraction of its capability. And even after enduring an unprovoked attack, they had chosen protection over destruction. That realization reshaped every assumption the galaxy held about them. The Apex's arrival didn't announce vengeance. It announced the end of ignorance.